Yeah, I'm Corey Rice, and the first half of this presentation is going to be sort of an introduction to me because I just moved to New Haven, and then the second half is going to be about the foundations of fabrication, which is a new exciting offer that we're going to put together with JR and I. So when we get to that part, JR, if you want to chime in, feel free. But I moved here predominantly because my wife got a job at Yale, and so just thought it'd be nice to share a little picture of the family. Here we all are, about a year ago. So, personal introductions. That's me, and then my wife is Carolyn. She's a fellow at Yale doing addiction medicine stuff. But about me, I am a teacher. First and foremost, that's what I do. And so here I'm working with some kids. I work with kids across all sorts of grade levels. The school that I was at had a fab lab, and so I was able to do interesting projects. In this case, students are using little Spiro robots to create a painting sort of like Jackson Pollock would have, or is kind of random. Other things I've done with students, once we built GPS modules where it could track your motion, and then we took them to Cedar Point, which in Ohio is an amusement park with lots of roller coasters. And you can see the yellow line there. It actually tracked out the geometry of the roller coaster as the student was riding it. So it would sample like 10 times a second. And here's some more things. I also play the other side of the Science Olympiad game that Cedric hosted. So I would coach students. And so here are a couple of projects. There's a ramp in the bottom right. There's a Mission Possible machine in the left. These are all student designed, student built things. So it's been a ton of fun to really work with kids for a long period of time. Here's some more. This year we had Sounds of Music, so we built an instrument. Sometimes we do things for homecoming with students, or we built some tables. There's a lot of different things that just come up in a school when you've got all these maker skills and things around that you just feel like you need to make sure that everybody can do the best they can. But about me, again, just the first half here, I took Fab Academy in 2017, which is a 6-month long, real intensive course where you learn how to make almost anything is the shtick that goes with the class. And it's fun, but it's way intense. It was like 40 hours a week on top of my teaching load. And so that took a lot of energy. But I got to build a lot of cool things. The last slide was a lot of circuits, and this is more sort of hands-on things. There's some molding and casting, composites, lasers, CNC, the top right there. I built from scratch with a couple other people a candle making robot. So it would dip the wick into hot wax, which is just kind of fun, a little pointless, but it really drilled down on that. I also like to build sort of in the more traditional ways. So I had a house back in Ohio and I did a lot of renovations. So this sort of building was how I was raised. As a kid, we were just a family of do-it-yourselfers. And so I had this house that I was able to gut and flip, which was a ton of fun. And so here, this turned out kind of small, but it was a lot of fun to take a kitchen and really do the whole thing. And at the time, I wasn't married yet, so I was doing this all alone, which is a lot to do, except that giant concrete countertop weighed about 800 pounds. So I had to get a bunch of friends and beer and pizza to convince them all to come help me. But then there's maker projects also. So I've done magic mirrors. In the middle is a Ghostbusters backpack. And on the right, that is a light up jacket that has the high school's logo. So it would blink green because we're the Green Wildcats. And so it was fun to have that sort of thing to wear for ridiculous homecoming events and that sort of stuff. But my biggest personal project is that I made a robot bartender. And so this is the one slide about it, but it's got a whole database, custom circuit boards I ordered from China, soldered on brand new chips that TI invented in 2018, built the database out so that it works. But new half. MakeHaven is offering a Foundations of Fabrication course, and it's real exciting. Essentially, all the skills that you just saw me list, that's what we're going to try and teach you in this course. And it takes years to accumulate all those skills, but every piece of experience that I've got, whether it's my traditional training, whether it's the Pecha Academy that I did with Eben Upton, who invented the things, or whether it's Fab Academy, all of that we're going to try and compact into one schedule so that you get exposure to all the different parts of a fab lab and how you'd integrate those skills in ways that you may not have thought about yet. But I've thought about it a lot. I've been teaching fab lab things to students in high school, and it's really our like best kids that you get in Science Olympiad. Cedric, I'm sure, can nod that those are all good kids that came through. And so I've been teaching fab things at a high level, wondering about how to make this accessible to everybody. Because this, and a risk of just trying to do clarity here, this course is designed to bring learning about fabrication to everybody, to people who are not able to make the commitment of full-time school or quitting a job. When I took Fab Academy, it was a whole job on top of another job. It was 40 hours easily of whatever spare time I could muster. The MakeHaven Foundations of Fabrication course is going to be about hands-on learning, where you, if you wanted to join, our students will be working on new projects every 2 weeks, and we keep that going. We have a set schedule, and I'll be there to support you if you need it. But trying to build a breadth of experience. You're going to build a personal portfolio that's going to build over the 10 months that we do it. So if every 2 weeks, 40 weeks total, trying to get you through a whole lot of different experiences. Because what I found, and probably what many of you have found, is that when you learn a new process, all of a sudden you start to try and make new connections in your mind of how can I do this thing differently, or how can I do that differently now that I have this new skill. But all of that in mind, we're going to still try and target only 10 hours weekly for classes. Now, that's a target for like how long the assignments would take, or to watch the lectures, or sort of be engaged with the class. And that's a tight time limit, but we're going to try and make it work. So here is the contact info. JR is the lead facilitator, and he's really the one making this happen. I am the lucky instructor who gets to try and help put all this stuff together. The start date is September, and JR and I were talking a little bit about that, so he'll maybe chime in with an update and some contact info.
Yeah, well, thank you, Corey. I'm very happy that Corey moved and brought all this experience because it really opens up the possibility of doing such an activity. It is still in development, and we are going to be sensitive to COVID concerns. So we're sort of monitoring to see where we can do as much as we can online and connect that to our existing resources.
Corey, the bartending robot, I think, is definitely a big hit. So be prepared for some questions about that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's lots of fun. If it weren't COVID times, I'd say come on over and have a drink. But you know, here we are.
How do you get anything done with that in your house? Wow.
Mostly it sits there.
What's the best drink it makes?
Oh, the first request from Carolyn was a Long Island iced tea.
Oh, go big or go home.
Yeah, I mean, there's some quirks about it where like I want it to sit in the corner and be stable. So it's only got liquor attached instead of any like mixers, right? Because those are shelf stable. And so it does all the hard part of the Long Island iced tea. You just add a little bit of sweet and sour and some Coke and you're good.
Wow. So many possibilities.
Yeah, it's got like a whole database and keeps track of how much is left in the bottle. And when it thinks it's run out, it pulls stuff from the menu, the whole bit.
Wow.
So it's just part of how I'm wired. I want to continue to learn and figure things out. So I taught myself how to do all that web server business from a book, and then wrote a bunch of code. I don't even have context for like if it's a lot or a little amount of code, but it was a fun process to learn how databases work and how to make one and manipulate them.
Wow.
I'm curious about the class that you're going to be co-presenting with MakeHaven. What's that going to look like? What are basic skills that at the end of this course that people are going to have? And what are sort of any goals that you have by the end of the course that you expect your students to?
Yeah, the class is going to be targeting sort of giving you the breadth of skills. And so I just started to get badged at MakeHaven, which is wonderful. I got my first badges yesterday from Steve Blick, maybe. Seebeck, yes. And so the goal of the class would be to take like your badging experience, sort of make sure that you're able to run the machine, turn it on, turn it off, do sort of the basics. The goal of this would be to focus more on how do you do higher level skills, like one of the things, I learned the laser yesterday. And so one of the things that when I'm building stuff at this point, I very rarely design, unless it's for an artistic goal. If I'm designing something to build or like to have structure, I'll 3D design it and then take that 3D design, do a thing where I can pull vectors from the 3D shape and then go from there, which maybe a lot of you know, but that's also like a hidden deeper level for lots of people. So trying to make sure that you know all of those tricks across the board on as many different machines and processes as we can get you, which for a lot of people, and yourself included, creative type, that just starts to spin the wheels for what can you make, how do you do this differently, what's the next thing that I want to try, and so trying to build those out so that they're connected ideas. It's sort of born from my Fab Academy experience, but the expectation for the class would be that you get to grow. And luckily, because it would be a small number of students, there is a cap to how many we can really accept and manage, especially because this would be the first year. I'll be able to work with you individually and try and figure out, when we're on a certain topic, how can we make sure that you move forward individually, and how can I and JR support you as a person instead of saying like, here's the outlined exact script of what we're going to do. So there's some, like, the official teacher word is differentiation for that, so that we can work with where you are and try and make sure everybody gets to move forward and kind of get your money's worth, I guess. Does that help? Did that answer anything for you?
Yeah, but I was more curious about, like, are there specific tools or projects that you're going to be working with? Like, is this meant more to be like, learn to fabricate things to make new tools, or is this more like learn to do stuff to make art?
Yes, I think is probably the best answer, because from the class you could do either. The hope is that there are going to be a series of sort of guided experiences you'd have where you get to build things, and one of those is to build a machine of your own design. My candle making machine was my example, right? And it's sort of a useless machine. Maybe you have a better idea for one, but it would be that you get experience just doing that one time, even if you're never going to do it again. Or in sort of the same vein, because the idea here is to give you a breadth of skills, we're going to make sure that you have some experience in the Bio Academy. JR is probably going to spearhead that lesson. But you're going to get experience in all those different places that you may not have walked into before that could enable you to make better art in one realm or another. And hopefully we can try and build those skills for you as you're going. Ultimately, at the end of the class, there'll be two things that you get to walk away from that feel very concrete to me. One is the portfolio, just to say, like, these are all of the things that I did in this course. So if you wanted to prove to anybody sort of what you've done. And the other would be the final project, which is really open to you for whatever you wanted to do or make, so that you can just go for it. And because you'll be in the class, you'll be able to ask questions, figure things out. If you need help with the code or circuits, or if you want to really dive deep into a multiple process thing where you're doing woodworking and molding and casting and all that together, we can sort of work together on how that goes and try and make sure that whatever you choose for your final project, whether it's a piece of art or that doesn't move or has any, spinning widgets in it, or whether it's a circuits based thing that's a robot, that in either of those cases or amalgam of those, you're able to grow and develop.
Cool.
Yeah.
And we'll be coming out with some more specifics of, what's going to be in it.
Yeah.
It's still in development.
Would you be? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Would you be open to the? Would you be open to the concept of group projects for that, or will it all be individual?
That's a tricky COVID thing, right?
Yeah.
There's no. You gotta be tricky. I don't know. I should not make any sort of a statement right now, right? That's probably the smart move.
Yes.
I'm also wondering if there's like an intersection between sort of community programming and what this class is offering, because I'm maybe thinking of a situation where, like, there's pockets of what you're doing in the class that I might be interested in, but not the entirety of the class itself. I'm just curious about like how you're thinking about that, or if there's like any intersectional spaces between the class and the wider MakeHaven community.
That feels like a good question for JR, but I just want to first say that really and truly, and it sounds like a hard sell for just like liberal arts education, you don't know what you don't know until you already know it, right? So if you don't know a process yet, it's sometimes hard to envision how valuable it is. Like one of the things we're going to go over is composite materials, hopefully, you know, if the timing and spacing and all that works out, where the most recent one I did, I took burlap and I encased it with like an epoxy sort of deal. And so that makes the burlap and epoxy both stronger. And so if you're building a piece of sculpture or something, that might give you a better weight to strength ratio, you know, and maybe without having been kind of egged into that class, you wouldn't know that. So there's lots of things, but JR may be thinking about how to make the class.
Yeah, so I think so. MakeHaven is by nature very DIY. Like we want people to do their own things, but we're also recognize that it's important to, as Corey's saying, sort of like have a large body of knowledge. So that's why we're making this as like a certificate. So we can say that you've been through this large breadth and done a project. It's going to be aligned, and it's going to help us to come up with projects that are independent and will be running. So I think that running this class will just make us stronger in general, and it will also help us develop projects that will be reused. And I imagine we'll come up with content. I think we're going to, whatever we can record, we'll probably share. So the idea is not really to lock it down, but I do think that there's a like special experience of getting what we want to have is something where somebody makes a commitment and they're going all the way through it. They get like intense support through that, and that the individual parts build on each other. So you're learning things at the end that rely at the beginning. So we're not necessarily going to break those units out and provide them as individual classes. It really is a whole, but it will inform and kind of push our education forward. Education is an area we're trying to develop more, because we really do see that some folks can jump in and read a book or watch a YouTube video and do it, and other people learn in different ways. And so this is one way to have a direct commitment and path that has a clear result, and that won't be for everyone, but it will be for some.
Will that be 10 hours a week there in the lab, in the space?
No, I think that's just like total project time. So you would be in the space independently.